I had a good friend or mentor. His name is Lain Hensley. It's not so much in the things that you say. I always ask people, like, do you hear me or do you feel me? You know, I'll go into high schools and schools bring me, like, work with these kids. They got issues. You know, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, let me work with the teachers because y'all got issues too.
Yeah.
You know? And I remember just holding him one day, and I literally caught myself, like, wanting to whisper in his ear, like, bud, just have some hope. It'll get better, you know? Like, just have some hope.
Pretty soon, inch by inch, life's a cinch, you know?
Right.
Hey, I think I'm starting to believe in myself because I have a pattern of following through on the commitments I make to myself.
Absolutely.
All right, you go first.
You go first.
Jeremy Bates, I will go first. I'm really excited to be offering another installment of You Go First with my good friend Jeremy Bates. We've known each other somewhere between 15 and 20 years.
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. To give a little sort of resume, Jeremy and I met at a youth conference that we were a part of for many years, and I show up and I hear about this amazing keynote speaker that spoke. I met you. I saw you present. It was totally mind-blowing. So Jeremy is a keynote speaker, travels all over the world, from aircraft carriers to lots of military things to obviously at-risk youth groups and just pretty much every youth group, which is possibly at risk, and corporate groups as well, using a combination of music, rhythm, beatboxing, and then, of course, a heartfelt story about your childhood and your upbringing and how that inspired you to try to make a difference for people. And as you call yourself, the hope dealer, who goes around really slinging hope, not dope, I know. and of course, talking about the passive side of hope, active side of hope, and giving people tools. So without further ado, welcome to You Go First, Mr. Jeremy Bates. Thanks for being here today.
I appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So the reason I wrangled you in today, because just a few hours ago, you were in front of 400 high school kids, playing some music, doing you're telling your story, your personal story, and then involving them in a bunch of different activities. And we'll get to kind of how you deliver your content. But first, let's just start with, like, here you are, obviously a good friend of mine, but I want people to get to know Jeremy. You can certainly find him at hopedealer.com. and learn about his programs and all that stuff. But Jeremy, give us a window into, like, where you were born, what it was like growing up, and we'll sort of see where the seed of inspiration and hope was really planted back in that day.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Long Beach, California, Harbor City to be exact, but grew up down there and was born into a situation where most people would kind of identify it as pretty dysfunctional. You know, I had a dad that was much older and a mom that was a teen mom, who, you know, they got together in some kind of probably unfortunate situations and started making some unhealthy choices. And, you know, had my brother, and a couple years later had me. And, you know, I always kind of joke, we were just talking, like, everybody has a story. And I don't think that mine is that much different than a lot of other people, in the sense that, you know, we all start off on this journey thinking that, you know, we're going to, I don't know, be born into some kind of situation that's going to put us into a perfect spot to be these amazing people. And, you know, you can go down every risk indicator that would be on any sort of assessment of struggle, you know, multiple divorces, drug addiction, incarceration, a level of poverty. And so being born into that, and then trying to come up through it, you know, I guess shaped me or molded me into being this kind of resilient kid that was really hell-bent on making sure that I went and kind of made a life for myself that I was never shown or was never around or never saw. And so I think a lot of my adult life, and certainly the work that I do, has really been about that, is not really kind of leaning into that idea of where I come from, but trying to use it as motivation and personal inspiration to go out and find a life, you know, that I never saw as a kid.
Yeah. Well, I know you're sensitive about really telling all the details, because, of course, you're trying to continue to have relationships with the people who, you know, you called mom and dad and family and all that growing up. But the reality is, it wasn't this perfect environment, this white picket fence and this intact family group. And I think anybody out there, if you're born into the, quote, picket fence, perfect intact family group, a lot of those people are in huge struggle, and, you know, they're maybe better at hiding it, or, like you said, the indicators aren't as obvious. But I know one of the things that you're really gifted at is coming in and making everybody feel safe to tell their story and to really look at the pieces and parts of their life and start putting those things together in a healthy way. How did you do that? Tell us more.
Well, I think human nature has us really kind of insulated, and a lot of people aren't vulnerable about their experience and certainly don't talk about it. I was at a new elementary school every year as a kid, and I never sat down with people I was around and been like, oh, I'm new here and this is why. It's because, my mom is in another new relationship, or we moved again, or, anything like that. And so I think there's this idea that when we're going through the battle and the struggle is you feel like you're alone. And my kind of whole charge in a lot of this is to be able to be vulnerable with people and share that. And kind of when I got into this work, or even when I was doing drug and alcohol prevention before, the minute that you kind of start leading that way, you get kids that are looking at you and being like, oh, like you understand what that's like. You know what it's like when your mom is with somebody else, or you're trying to integrate in a new family or in a new school, or wondering if your mom's coming home that night or if she's going to be alive when she does come home, dealing with drug and alcohol issues and the fights that come along with that and the kind of fear, the kind of lack of safety that's involved. And the more that we can be real about it, I think the more people understand that they're not alone, and that little bit of lack of isolation and isolated feelings is what allows people to kind of start to expand and be like, oh, okay, let's talk about this a little bit more. And obviously we go into the idea of what happens when we start talking about things and having conversations with people, then we can all of a sudden be more real and connected and help us people figure out how to get out of those situations or to start living a different reality.
Yeah, I know sometimes you jokingly talk about with your brother or friends will be like, hey, we need to sneak out and go do something. You're like, we don't sneak out, we just walk out. Like nobody's really keeping track of us. Yeah, and here's this little kid like growing up in poverty, growing up obviously in where food security is a problem. We're just feeling like, hey, where are we going to be tonight? And then you get into alcohol and drug prevention. Like, how do how does that happen? Like, any inspirational people come along the way and just like light the spark in you? It's like, I'm going to be president.
I don't know. We talk about this idea of like, I was this kid that was always addicted to potential and finding out like the best versions of me. And so I was a great athlete. And so I would always try and excel in sports, anything that I got involved with. Even when I first started playing music, I wanted to be the best sax player and get involved with stuff like that. How do I get involved with drug and alcohol prevention? That's just a total accident, in all seriousness. We were talking mentors. There were certainly teachers and people, I talk to people about when you come from kind of dysfunctional environments, it's really important to find environments that see that goodness in you that you're maybe not communicated, or you're maybe not made to feel. And so I would try and find those. I would find family, friends that had families that were really solid families and go feel what that family felt like. Yeah. Or I would get involved with leadership or clubs or other things that teachers would be like, yeah, you're great. You're doing great. I think about mentors, and in the way that I even got into this work, I was in 8th grade and I was the activities director. And this guy named John Alston came, and he was this kind of really well-known motivational speaker. And I got to shadow him all day. And after he did his program, he came up to me. He was like, hey, I see something really special in you. And I was like, what? And he's like, I see a lot of kids every week, and there's just something really special about you. And then you fast forward when I'm doing drug and alcohol work as a prevention specialist, how I get involved in this speaking thing is I show up to a conference here in Chico, and the keynote speaker canceled, and the lady that ran it came and was like, hey, can you cover the hour time? And I had my guitar with me, and I'm like, sure, I'll go up there and talk to these kids and have some fun, play some music. And it went over really well. And then afterwards we were talking, and it turns out the reason why I got that was because John Alston was supposed to be the speaker there and ended up becoming incredibly ill. And so my sort of transformation of that, and it was weird because I kind of forgot about that conversation until she said his name, and it was like, oh my gosh, like this is wild. But I had no direction to get into drug and alcohol prevention at all. I was a successful high school basketball coach. I thought I wanted to do that. I thought I wanted to be like a D1 basketball coach and won league championship and coach of the year and all this stuff. But then I met this amazing lady, and I'm like, let's go travel around the world. And that's what we thought was going to happen. And then like a week before we were leaving the country, found out that we are going to have a child instead.
Awesome.
And so we were jobless and homeless and baby on the way. And I had a guy reach out to me and said, hey, I know you're a really successful basketball coach, which means you're good with kids. And I got this job doing drug and alcohol prevention. Would you be interested in it? And again, I wasn't all that passionate about it per se. I just needed a job. And I went in there, and even that vulnerability in the job interview when they're like, why do you want this job? And I was like, because I have a child coming and I needed a job. I remember I went home and I told my wife what my response was, and she was like, "Are you crazy? You just said that?" And it turns out that's why I got the job. Is the director he really liked the response.
Yeah.
But once I got into it, and that's really when I started to kind of identify, who I was and where I came from, and how that could kind of be this pretty good tool to connect with people, and then also bringing in the sort of gifts and talents that I had as being a storyteller and a musician. And, I'm not like Steve Chalet, but I could do some magic tricks or some illusions to get people. But that's kind of where that came from. It wasn't that I was this kid that came from, drug and alcohol addicted parents and I had this passion. I was this kid that came from that wanted to be really good at all these great things. And then landed in the spot where apparently I was supposed to be.
Well, the saying goes, fate will lead those that will, those that won't, it will drag.
Yeah. And
looking at the John Alston story to even how you got into coaching, how you got into prevention work, how we met at that first one, and I hope everybody out there, really, if you pause long enough and really look at your life and think, okay, if there's perfection unfolding here, what would that be? How do I use every moment that has existed in my life to this point and leverage that to set me apart from anybody who hasn't been through those same struggles? Because I know when I see you in front of a group that has lived through stuff that you lived through, you tell stories I can't tell.
Yeah.
You give them hope where there is hopelessness for some of them. And they're on the passive side of hope, where they're just hoping that it gets better, but they have no action plan for that.
Right.
And I know you really paint a nice picture of hey, here's how to create an action plan. What's your sort of formula for somebody out there that might be, they're that eighth grader, that's followed you around maybe. They're that person that's really struggling with being out of control of their life, but as they get older, what would you say are some of your keys to help move people forward?
Well, the first one is hope. I mean, it would be crazy not to start there. And what I mean by that is in this idea of, sort of awakening, there's some idea that hope doesn't allow you to be present in where you are because you're hoping for something that you don't have. Mm-hmm. But science tells us that, it's like there's something that we want to drive us, and human nature is like we're always trying to achieve something. And so it's to have this idea of what hope is, but not have it be this just like what you would call passive thing or this feeling or an emotion. We were talking earlier, when I first started this, I would talk about that, just don't lose hope, just don't lose hope. But you realize that feeling or an emotion of hope, if nothing is changing, it's going to wane, and then you become apathetic, and then you become hopeless, and then life becomes very dangerous. So we want to get to the idea that hope is a verb, that there's action that's behind it, which means there's something that you hope for, but most importantly, you got to figure out how to get it. The crux of it is do you have the courage to actually make it happen? So that would be one. And then another thing is to love more in that idea of hope, and not love in the sense of I need these loving relationships, but just, I think Cho Yoder was the first person that I had said, love is a choice, choose wisely. And when I think about the relationships that we have, is to understand, and not just with other people, but even with ourselves. It's super easy to kind of be well, I'm going to love on everybody else, but then you wonder why people got all these, emotional issues and mental health issues. And it's I think that a lot of us have forgotten that we need to have that same sort of grace and choose to love ourselves, especially in those moments when we're not showing up as the best versions of who we are. I've had to even learn in these later years, that there's this concept that says, bad choices don't make bad people. And even in my own world with all this knowledge and going out and telling people, it's you make choices that aren't congruent with who you are. And then you start to get down on yourself and you're I'm so horrible. And you get into that pattern of believing in those things that you were told when you were a kid, or that you were shown when you were a kid, when people would bounce in and out of your life. And that's a crazy spiral. So it's how do you stop yourself in those moments when you get into that level of self-hatred and being hey, I'm going to choose to love myself even in these really hard times, and have an awareness of why you're doing the things that you're doing. Yeah. But also love other people in a way that's respectful and honorable and pride-filled in the way that you do it, and loving the things that you do, because loving people is important. But if you don't love the work that you do, then that's going to surface as well. Or if you don't love to play music or the hobbies that you have, it's just, I just want people to go all in and really experience that.
Well, you said something, when you discovered you're good at things, whether it's music or basketball or a lot of movement right now to figure out what you're good at, and that passion and that drive to do it comes from something that might come very naturally to us. In the spirit of like learning to kind of trust yourself. I heard the other day, if I was my own workout partner and every day I'm like, I'll see you at the gym tomorrow. I'll see you at the gym tomorrow. And they never show up. Pretty soon you're like, you're clowning me, you're not going to be there.
Right.
And when we make a commitment to do something and we don't take action, we lose trust in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And getting a path to like making little commitments, delivering on it, little one, deliver. Pretty soon, inch by inch, life's a cinch, you start to build a history with yourself.
Right.
That is like, hey, I think I'm starting to believe in myself because I have a pattern of following through on the commitments I make to myself.
Absolutely. There's that idea of what confidence is. And self-confidence in particular. And I think there's this notion that people believe that people are confident just by nature. And the truth is confidence is something that you build in yourself by what you're saying is keeping these little promises and always achieving. It's like, I don't let myself down. And so some people will be like, well, are you confident when you walk on stage? And you're like, well, yeah, I still get really nervous, because it means a lot to me. But I know that I never let myself down because I've kind of walked through life that way. It's silly as it sounds, like if I'm out on a run and I tell myself I'm going to sprint to that mailbox right there and nobody's around. And if I'm sprinting and I'm like, it seems a little bit too far.
Halfway there.
And I stop, nobody saw
light.
that. But even like those simple things, which is like every time I tell myself I'm going to do something, I do it.
Yeah.
And I don't pull up short on it. And the more that I can do that in myself, then the more confident I'll be in those situations. And that has to do, if you're not confident in speaking with people, it's just like, well, when I go to this place, I'm going to talk to 2 random strangers. And if I could do that, then I'm learning to trust myself, but it's also building these things in you, which is like, I could get better at those things that I want to be better at.
Yeah. Well, you said hope and love. Mm-hmm. And maybe you've probably got more to that formula. You did remind me of something you always say, which is, you don't want to sacrifice what you want most for what you want in the moment.
Right.
And I know you have a process you go through with your groups to go, what are things I value, and start crossing things out to determine what do I want most. And what I want most is to trust myself, to follow through, to be trustworthy, to have hope, but take action on that. What are other pieces to that formula, if there are?
The 3 kind of landing points that I try and weave in to content is to hope more, is to love more, and to do more, which is to be more actionable. And it could be, whether it has to do with mental health stuff, if it's exercise, if it's, engaging in those things that you love and making time for that. I just recently started playing basketball again. And I feel like I'm a much better version of myself. Mm-hmm. I'm not nearly the player I ever was. Now I find myself in the paint just like banging bodies, and I see openings that I used to think I could get through, and now, they close quickly. But even just like making time for myself to go play, obviously there's the exercise component, and they say for, every, I think, half hour of exercise, you get 12 hours of healthy brain function. So there's that component, but then there's a camaraderie of the guys that I play with. And it's just one of those things that you look forward to that, my wife would be like, you need to go play basketball again. Come back as a better version of you. So just, it's just, I don't know. I think in life there's a lot of stuff that we get busy with. And I want to kind of refocus myself and people to refocus on this idea of intentionality and the things that we are doing. And how many hours you're on your phone versus how many hours you're actually picking up the phone and calling somebody, or engaging in those things that you want to become better at, or want to, do more of, or any of that. It's just, I think if we can be directed, and these individuals that are, motivated and inspired to do stuff, then we have a better version of who we are than just sitting back and waiting for things to happen. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of, sitting back and waiting for things to happen going on. You mentioned your wife. I know she's a marriage and family counselor, I believe. Therapist. Yeah. So, of course, you get a lot of side work, I'm sure, that she delivers directly to you. We both have very inspiring and great wives that keep us in check and push us to continue to do the work we love. But, it's tough when you're traveling and you have 2 young boys, and now they're growing up and being on the road. It's a family thing, whether the family's there or not. What are some of the key messages? If somebody says, I want to have the Hope Deal, I want to have Jeremy come and talk to my young people, whether they're, a group home situation or some at risk or some very affluent high school, or whether you're speaking to military groups somewhere around the world. I know you've done a lot of that with the armed forces. What's kind of the feeling, or if somebody a half hour says, oh, well, what did he talk about? What's the one thing you hope that they get from your presentations?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm like I had a good friend or mentor. His name is Lain Hensley.
What are you about to say? Yeah.
No, just when I first got started, it was really cool because when I would show up places with you, we had a good enough relationship where we'd always get together at the end and being like, so let's go through what you talked about. And, maybe you kind of went off on this tangent here and maybe you didn't need to say that. And it was this kind of model that you taught me, which is like, you create content and then you see what works and then you throw some stuff out and you compress it. And then you put some more stuff in there, see what doesn't work and compress it. And so by the time you get a half hour, you just have just haymaker after haymaker of what people need. And so what I want people to take away most, is the idea, first of all, that you're not alone, that nobody's alone in whatever struggle they're going through or whatever dream they're trying to achieve, so there's a collectiveness in the experience that we're all involved with as humans. I want to talk about vulnerability and authenticity in that, and to get people to start being more real, so that people know they're not alone, but also so that we can really start addressing the issues as they are and not just the fronts that we see. I want to give people some actionable things to think about. And that's the whole, the hope, more, love, more, do more concept. And that's the crazy part is, I'll go into high schools and schools bring me and be like, work with these kids. They got issues, in the back of my mind. I'm like, well, let me work with the teachers because y'all got issues too, because people are people. And I'll get plenty of teachers that will come up afterwards and be like, hey, that was amazing, but I think I needed this just as much as the kids did. Because we all get into those places. And there's not a whole lot of difference between kids and adults with the exception of, bills and responsibility and bitterness and
hopefully not too much bitterness, but life is hard. And like you said, this is our chance as now grown-ups to adult and to say, what are we doing to prepare these young people for a world that is totally changing with cell phones? I know you have your two sons. I know that a lot of your hope conversation was, maybe like this exciting, like now I'm the hope dealer and I'm out. And then, challenges happen. I know that your son has some physical challenges that you're dealing with. And I think it really kind of adjusted your, like, how does hope fit into physical struggle when you have a medical situation? So how has hope evolved for you through that?
I just remember very specifically, my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, and in that battle, it was life-changing for all of us. I mean, for him too, but for us that love him. And he was going through the whole why me thing and all that. And I remember just holding him one day, and I literally caught myself like wanting to whisper in his ear, like, bud, just have some hope. It'll get better, like just have some hope. And I caught myself because it's like, what if this doesn't get better? And then I'm going to tell him to hope for something else. And he's going to look at me and be like, I hope for this to go away and nothing changed. So why would I have this thing that you've been talking about is so important? And it got me really thinking about that. And then also in my own world of like, I felt like I was on the top of the world. My business was stronger than it had ever been. We were doing better as a family. Everybody was just great. And then all of a sudden this thing hits and you realize how easy it is just to get sucked back down and to feel those feelings. And it's like, man, how do I not just be wrapped in this feeling, an emotion of hope, but how do I be active in making things change? And so I was thinking with him specifically, it's like, hey, if you want this to change, like you can hope for it to change, but there's also things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to get better sleep. You're going to have to be less stressed. You're probably going to have to change your diet a little bit. You're going to have to take this medication. You probably have to drink more water. Like there are these things that we can help change the situation, but we can't make it never go away. And I think that's, that was a big shift for me because then I dove into what the science of hope was. And there's literally research around it. There's a cool statement that Benjamin Franklin says that hope is like fool's gold, and we've been traveling around telling people, and I think you were there when I first went back to Camp Royal after that stuff happened. And I remember I was apologizing to kids and being like, I've been traveling around for the last 12 years, just telling people just to have hope. And then all of a sudden when life slaps me upside the head, you're like, oof, it's not just the feeling or emotion. Like we have to be active in wanting this stuff to change, so then it's become really about trying to get people to not just be in that emotional space of it, but to have a plan to, we call it the triangle, the trifecta, the true hope trifecta. That's where you put the thing that you want at the top and then figure out what you're going to do to get there. And then the accountability piece, which is who you surrounding yourself with that's going to help you in those times. Willpower to get that thing that you're wanting for is it's finite, right? You don't just have unlimited willpower. And I think that's one of the things that we don't quite understand. That's why when people get into like recovery and 12-step programs, it's like you need to go to a meeting every day. not because it's like some crazy cult, but because you need people around you, because the more that you're exerting willpower, it's actually depleting through your glucose system. And so it's like, hey, if you wake up in the morning and you're struggling willpower all day, by the time it gets to be 3:00 in the afternoon, you're like, your resources are gone.
Yeah.
And so then what happens? Well, then do you relapse, or do you have somebody that you can go talk to that's going to remind you and kind of refill you up? I know when I'm on the road, if I'm trying to be healthy, it's super easy for me to jump on a plane and start off good. You know, I always joke about, like, I take a little bag of almonds and I'll play the game where I'm trying to see how many bites I can get out of one almond, you know, just like, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to be on my grind. And then you land in some state and you're like, I haven't eaten in 8 hours. I'm tired.
Yeah.
And let me just go hit the Whataburger, you know, let me just go get a burger and fries and an extra large Dr. Pepper.
Oh, man.
And it's easy. But it's like when I travel, like with our True Hope team, and I'm with all these other people that are kind of inspired to kind of be the best versions of themselves, you know, I'll go sit down at dinner and I'll order something bad. And, you know, my buddy Flip will be like, what's up, dude? I thought you was trying to get a 6-pack. Like, well, I thought you were trying to be this guy.
Now, you just glanced over the True Hope Tour is you and like free runners to all kinds of different, you know, dynamic, from drummers to mentalists to, you put this combination together. I know you've done it a bunch down in Stockton.
Yeah.
And I've been to programs before where there is a line of young people wanting to shake your hand and give you a hug and really thank you for dropping some hope and giving them some actions to do as well. So, you know, how did that get started, or just like, what's that all about? The True Hope Tour?
The True Hope Tour, it came about, it was in 2010. I had some guy approach me that wanted to have somebody bring to life what he called like 10 power principles. We called it the power of 10. And we wanted to start it on 10, 10, 10. And so I got to kind of dream up this biggest version of like a stage show. And what I wanted to do was to, you know, I try and engage through the mediums of music and some illusion and magic and storytelling and comedy. But I know there's people in that audience that don't care about those things.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what can I use as metaphors? Because really in the work that we're doing, that's all that we're doing. It's for the same reason I was a basketball coach. You're just trying to teach kids about life skills through the medium that they love, which is basketball. And so in this stage show, it was like, how do I tell them about overcoming obstacles? And you're like, oh, free running. Like, this is kind of cool. It was like right when stunts were getting all into free running, and it was all the superhero things.
Some are very famous stuntmen as well, right? Like
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
You know, the Spider-Mans, everybody that you see in one of those suits is one of these guys.
It's awesome.
You know, the new Roadhouse movie that just came out. You know, they're these guys, and what's cool about them is they're not about credit or accolades. They just want to go in and follow their passion and do what they love to do and make somebody else look good. Awesome. You know, there's poetry, there's live music, there's live art. You know, we got an artist that paints live on stage, and we have a kid that comes up and ruins the painting midway through. And we use that as a metaphor of like, you know, we got this blank canvas in life and you're trying to create something cool. And midway through, maybe you make a bad choice or somebody else comes and makes bad choices for you. And so it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to start the painting over, or do you take a step back? And the artist that we have is a guy named Blair Russin, has this ability to take those swipes and he'll readjust the painting and make those swipes become some of the most vibrant parts of it. And the idea to try and teach that sometimes those things that are the most harmful or hurtful to us in the moment can become the most vibrant pieces of who we are as long as we don't quit.
Wow.
So it was like the ultimate dream child of like, how do I find really cool people to make these things come to life? And I'm just kind of the ringmaster of connecting the metaphoric dots. And then that tour went away. And one of my good friends, Gabe Nunez, who's one of the co-founders of Tempest, was like, well, how do we keep this going? And so their brand was True Freedom, and I was the Hope dealer. And so we're like, let's just call it True Hope.
Nice.
And pool our resources together and make these things happen. So ever since 2011, we've been doing it that way.
A lot to try to get through here in the end there. You've been talking about music and things. I know you kind of beatbox and bring in, I don't know if you can do anything.
No, I don't know if I could. You know, I don't know. There's no low end on these things. But.
Well, I've just been mesmerized. It's not a skill that I've developed, let's just say. And so from obviously, I mean, young people today, we have to try to deliver a message to different, even older people. I mean, just like from swiping on TikTok or Instagram or X or Facebook or whatever, it's like there's stuff coming at us. And we talk a lot about like, you know, people search you under motivational speaker, but to really light the spark of motivation, people have to kind of make that fire for themselves. You give them some information, you give it to them in a way that really hits them in a different way. so that they're motivated.
Right.
You know, in really searching for that motivation, what's your angle on how to like light that spark in somebody?
I think it's almost catch them being wrong about what they feel like the experience is going to be. And not to be like, gotcha. But it's because then it gives you permission, or me permission, to ask them, well, if you thought this was going to be this way, then what else could you potentially be wrong about?
Yeah.
And maybe one of those things is the way you see yourself. If I tell my story about where I came from, or who my mom was, or, living conditions, or things that I had to overcome in that way, most people, when they see me up on stage and I'm rocking some J's and I got this certain kind of fit, and they're like, oh, this, they come in and they create their little story of you.
Yeah.
And, they come into the environment and the very first thing they see is the picture. And then all of a sudden I got, drum machines and loop stations and a guitar. And then I start creating this music. And then they're like, what is this all about? I'll even try and learn the kind of music based where I am regionally to try and I'll learn it in the hotel the night before and throw it out there. And it's like, oh, okay. And so it's like, how do I capture you for a couple minutes and to give me a couple more minutes? And then I'll just keep hopefully being different than what you expect.
Yeah.
And then through that process, it's like, okay, well, now that I've got you locked in, let's get you to start thinking about what you could be not wrong about, but how you could be seeing things differently. What would it be like if you came in here and you gave this a chance and actually let this set in? And what would it be like if you actually saw potential in yourself instead of being the person that only saw the negative or the struggles that you come from? And so, that's kind of when I built my program, my presentation, or just really the tools of engagement of it. It's like, people are like, are you a motivational speaker? And I'm like, no, I don't want to be lumped into that at all, because it always felt kind of like cheesy and kind of, kitschy, or whatever that word is. But even like doing loops, I'll learn a song the night before, and there's a part of me that wants to come out and mess up in front of people, so I can be like, oh, I'm not trying to be polished at this. I just want you to know that I was up in my hotel the night before trying to do something cool for you. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but this is what's real. And I think the more that we can be that for people, then the more they can see truthfully who they are and know that their version of reality and who they are is good enough.
Well, life is certainly an imperfect, process. And people say, people don't want perfection, they want connection. Mm-hmm. And I've seen you connect with people through music, through your authenticity, through your story, and to light that spark in them that says, if this guy can do it, or like this fool can do it. Like, you use such great street language. I don't possess such language. You just have a way of coming alongside any group that you're in front of and being authentic, telling them your story, whether it's your origin story or the story unfolding still with your family and with your son, and how you're dealing with this epilepsy and how we're dealing with getting a little older. I think you're 49.
49.
Met you a long time ago. And, so many steps to life that can really, really pull people down or can propel them to the next step.
Yeah. Even that, like when you say, and cause I've had clients that would be like, you're like the chameleon. Like you can go, cause I'll work with corporate people. I'll work with, military people. I'll work in high schools. I've done like K-6 programs on homesteads in Hawaii, where they're calling me uncle, and I got to show up in my, my slippas and, and jails and all that. And it's like, you can go connect with anybody. And it's not that I change who I am in those situations, but again, when you go back to my story, where you're a new kid at a new school every year, where I'm trying to integrate into a new family every year, you become a master at really walking into places and casing it real quick and being like, okay, what do I got to do to stay alive in here? What do I got to do to connect? How do I just fit in real quick? And so you take, that sort of dysfunctional upbringing and the struggle that comes along with it. And now it becomes one of my greatest assets, because I could walk into any room and just case it real quick and be like, what's the language that these people are using? What's kind of their general state of being? What's going to connect with them? And my brain just starts working real quick. And again, for as much as I would love to go back and be like, I wish I would have had a different childhood, there's that idea that everything that happens to us and every choice that we make really makes us who we are. And for as much as I would love to go back and have a different experience in a lot of different ways,
oh man,
I just wouldn't. It's funny, because just this last year, I hadn't seen my mom in 23 years. And then through a long story that we don't even have time to talk about in here, all of a sudden reappears and I go connect with her after not seeing her for 23 years. And I used to tell people before I saw her, I was like, I haven't seen her in a long time. And if I did see her, one of the things I would do is thank her. And they're like, what? Like, knowing how she kind of, was in and out of your life and the kind of situation she put you in, why would you be thankful for that? And it's like, well, for as much fun as it wasn't, and for all the trauma that I'm still having to battle, it's created this ability in me to have a story to connect with people, and hopefully help them. And I've had friends of mine that reach out and be like, hey, happy birthday, and I'm so glad, I was like, birthdays are kind of hard, when you're not hearing from the woman that gave birth to you on your birthday. And it's like, well, hey, but at least you got that story. And then there are times when I'm feeling down, I'm like, but I didn't want that story. I didn't want that. But at the same time, you got it. And so it's like, well, what do you want to do with it? And do you want to be a victim of it? Or do you want to be able to kind of parlay it into something that inspires you to be different, and at the same time inspires people as you're on your journey? I think that's an important one too, is if you're trying to inspire people, it's not so much in the things that you say. A lot of the feedback that I get is, I always ask people, like, do you hear me or do you feel me? And when people are in it, they're like, I feel you. This isn't just words that you're saying. Like, I can feel like how you're living. And that's kind of what I've always wanted to be for people, is just somebody that somebody could look towards and be like, okay, like, I see how that guy's moving through life, and I kind of want to move like that too.
Well, I appreciate you spending time, telling some of the story. And I know that sometimes when I present as well. It's like, it's a bit of therapy for us to re-look at our life, and we kind of volunteer ourselves as tribute, to go, all right, I'm going to open myself up. I'm going to be the first to cry, or the first to tell you something that's deeply personal, that I'm still dealing with. Yeah. In hopes that, in the spirit of you go first, in hopes that they would follow. Yeah.
Most people are trying to let a scab heal, and we go out every day and be like, oh, check this out.
Let me just tear this off.
Reopen it up for you. But yeah, we've talked, you just at the last camp, it's, even in the work that you do, and there's been a piece of me, it's like, man, I don't want to have to keep talking about where I come from every day, because it's hard. Yeah. It's like most people want to like do the work and then package it up. I used to work with a guy named Rob Bean that was in Vietnam, and I remember I saw Saving Private Ryan, and I went to him the next day. I'm like, dude, how do you deal with the stuff that you saw? And he goes, Jeremy, I put it in a closet, and I never walk past that closet. And you're like, I get it. Yeah. And I do the complete opposite. Every day I go to work, I'm like, where's the closet? Let me open the door. Let me show you what's in there.
And see if, and
it takes a work, and it takes a toll too if you don't do the work. Because then you're just reliving it and reminding yourself, and that whole idea of I wasn't enough. And I have to tell people that again. And I can have all this great stuff surrounding me, but if that day I wake up and I'm still that little kid that was made to not feel that way, sometimes I attach onto that message. And that's a dangerous tailspin too. So, it's a fine balance. And I think anybody that does that, and not like, for like gratuitous reasons of like, look at me, it always inspires me, and it gives me, an appreciation and respect for what it takes to do that, because it's not the easiest thing. People are always like, you got the best life, you got the best job. And I'm like, yeah. First of all, I got to relive trauma every day. Yeah, right. And second of all, I got to be the new kid every day. And third of all, half the group hates me before I start because of what I do for work.
They're like, another assembly.
Another motivational speaker.
Oh, man. Well, we laugh because it's uncomfortable. It's hard. And you're talking about stuff like, when people pay you to come and do music and walk through a leadership model that can move people from this to that. They're not paying you to open up your heart and your soul and say, hey, this is what's real. This is but authenticity is one of the most attractive energies that anybody can put off. And it compounds the authenticity of people around them. Yeah. And I know you bring that, and I know that can be very scary. And it's a gift when you open up yourself fully to an audience, and even in an audience of one right now. But I hope this story today and you spending this time is an opening for people to find you and have you come in and speak to their groups and talk to you about how you can, how you can open up your heart to open up their hearts and really step into, more love, more hope, and
more doing.
So with that, bud, I appreciate you doing this today and spending some time with the You Go First audience. I hope they'll listen to the audio or catch it on YouTube. I hope I can get you in front of more groups as well, because I know it's just such a gift to me and everybody that you interact with. And
nice. And I hope Ross somehow puts in like the doing it well soundtrack for this. Bring in some LL for me.
Hey, your wish is our command, but I really hope we can. Our hope, we'll be in the active side. I'll bet Ross makes that happen. I know him.
No, I love that you catch yourself, man. How many times you're like, hey, hope you have a great day. And you're like, hey, make it a great day. You don't just hope for a great day. You make it a great day.
Let's get after it. So with that, to everybody, hey, thanks for listening. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you, Jeremy Bates, for being here and for being the hope dealer and terrifying yourself and opening up your heart and soul to so many groups around the world, man. I love you, buddy.
I love you too, bud. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for being a friend, for sure.
Woohoo. All right. Let's go.
Thanks for listening to another episode of You Go First. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to listen to another episode, you can find us at yougofirst.live, or you can see more about our host, Lain Hensley, on his Instagram at OneDreamChaser. To learn more about his company, Odyssey Teams Inc., go to odysseyteams.com or follow all their social media channels at Odyssey Teams. Thanks again, and we hope that you will go first to share our podcast with a friend or colleague. Now, you go first.
Don't forget to like us on the button below. Follow us by clicking the bell. You'll get all future episodes, as well as you can certainly find the podcast on the audio version everywhere where podcasts are found. So we're looking forward to the next episode. Got a lot of really exciting guests coming up. Thanks for watching.